Hey guys, after watching today's video, you will learn how to checkmate with the bishop and a knight, the rarest checkmate in chess. And even if you are an amateur player, you will be able to do that, even though lots of even titled players failed to do that. I remember one time I saw Hikaru on the stream. He had like half a minute in blitz against some other GM and he failed to deliver this checkmate because, yeah, it requires some technique and it requires the well-prepared memory of how exactly to do this, especially like the W move with the knight, for example, or the cutting with the bishop technique. I will explain everything to you very simply, and you will be able to do this if you practice it a couple of times. Definitely, I guarantee this. And also, you will enjoy the game that I played that featured this checkmate, or at least an attempt to deliver this checkmate. So without further ado, let's dive into this. This is round 9 at No Risk Cup, a strong classical tournament here in Almaty, Kazakhstan. In the last round, I'm playing against a local prodigy whose name is Yel Sultan Kali Ahmed. He has recently won a strong open Group B in Spain, El Brigade, and he's a very strong player from a chess family. His sister, when she was just 14, became Kazakhstan female champion in chess. So yeah, obviously they are both very strong youngsters. He goes e4, and I play the Sicilian defense. I prepared for him, and I saw that he plays the English attack against the Najdorf, which I play sometimes. This is the English attack. The setup for white features usually long castles and attack on the king side against my king, whereas black often, for the time being, leaves the king in the center and just goes knight d7, rook c8, queen c7, and pushes the pawns on the queen side, preparing some counterplay there. And then, when necessary, black castles king side, but that often is very dangerous because of this attack. Here I choose a trendy move h5, which is aimed at, for the time being, preventing this g4 idea, even though it's weakening the king side, but it also serves the purpose of slowing down white's attack. He castles long, I go here, he develops the bishop, I go rook c8, very standard, he goes king b1, also a very useful move whenever you castle long, and I go queen c7, or rather I go b5 here. I was hesitating between queen c7 and b5, both are perfectly normal according to the engine, and actually because he has misplayed it a little bit, because bishop e2 is not the best square for the bishop here, it's worth postponing the development of the bishop now. Because he has misplayed it, I've already equalized. It's equal according to the engine. He goes knight d5, which is a standard idea here. And here I was calculating both knight takes and bishop takes. And the engine says both lead to equality. I calculated knight takes for some time, takes. Here I'm putting pressure on c2, so probably it's best for white to move the bishop again, which is why it was not advisable to spend time moving it in the first place. Takes. And I thought that this position should be approximately equal. But I thought I'll spice things up, and I decided instead to take with the bishop here, which is also fine according to the engine, and go knight b6. So two of my knights are taking this pawn, and he has no way of saving it but for giving up the bishop for the knight. And here we have a very imbalanced position. I have the dark squared bishop, he has the light squared bishop. Both are not very impressive at the time, because lots of pawns are on the respective color complexes, but both can have some future when some lines, diagonals open up for the bishops. And here my opponent surprises me with queen b4, and I realize that he has some positional understanding, because, well, obviously he does. He is rated 2050, which is a very high rating for a junior in Kazakhstan. He's like 13 years old. So, and the positional understanding dictates that white should play on the queen side, even though white's king is on the queen side, castled long. Because the d5 pawn, whenever you have a d5 pawn with white, you should play on the queen side, strategically, unless like there are some other things going on the board, unless you fear getting checkmated or something like that. You should play on the queen side, because this is where you are stronger. And whenever you are playing with black and your pawn is on e5, look which side your pawn chain is looking at. So my pawn chain d6 and e5 is looking at the king side. That's why I should play on the king side, usually pushing pawns on this side of the board. Again, barring some other things happening on the board. For example, sometimes you don't want to do that because you will get checkmated. So it is quite a risky, like tactically, strategy of pushing the a4 and c4, pushing those pawns for white, but strategically it's a very good strategy because you have this strong d5 pawn, and my opponent decides to go for the strategy rather than the attack on my king. I go bishop d8, securing this queen, and he goes a4. And if I take, he can take here with check and then take on a6. And even though he's taking pawns in front of his king, opening up potentially lines for me, I didn't like it. And the engine agrees that this is better for white, so I have to move the king, and then queen takes a6. And I don't have immediate like attack against his king. His king is safe and he has lots of pieces surrounding his king. Also, I will need time to somehow hide my king, and everything is hanging for me. For example, after queen c7, he just goes c3, preventing me from creating any shenanigans there. And after g6, well, he has lots of good moves. His knight can jump here, for example, and it's all good for white. White is much better. So that is why I do not take this pawn. Instead, I go rook b8, which is a mistake according to the engine. I should have just castled here, and I should have allowed this pawn to be captured like this, and then moved the queen here. And now that I see it, it's very logical. Why didn't I do that? So I have my own, of course, ideas of attacking on the queen side here. And now I also am harassing his pawns and his position. Yeah, also it's kind of risky to allow this in future. For example, like if I take in future here, rook g1 comes and I might get attacked, but he has no pieces currently to attack me here. So maybe it's even a good idea just to capture this pawn. For example, the engine says queen a6 is the move, attacking the rook, and then bishop here, bishop g3, and queen takes g2. Just calmly keep taking this pawn. But it's a very risky strategy, obviously. And I did not think of doing this. I decided, you know what, I'll just go rook b8. I will not give him any pawns for the time being. But this is worse for black because I've spent too much time moving around. Rook here, queen here. So I've wasted some time. And instead, I should have just castled and not paid attention to the pawn. But it's hard. I usually do exactly this same thing, and then the engine says you should have paid attention to this pawn, and here I did the opposite, and I shouldn't have. So f4 is a very good move by my opponent, opening up the center because my king is still in the center, and if I do nothing, he'll take, and his d pawn will be marching, and also his queen will prevent me from getting castled. So of course I don't allow this. I go e4, top engine move. He takes my pawn here, and instead of taking back right away, which I didn't like because of knight d4, and then knight c6 ideas, and this could happen with check, so I didn't like it. Instead of taking, I just castled here because I decided I'll take next. He cannot take my pawn because his queen is pinned. So he goes queen d4 here, I take, and he takes. And actually, I've a little bit outplayed him in this position. He had some other moves to keep the equality. Now I'm even better after bishop takes b6, which is the move that I wanted to play in advance while looking at this position. Because yes, he can take my b5 pawn, but then I go bishop e3. His bishop is attacked, and then I take this pawn. And from afar, initially I wanted to do that, but closer to this time, here I decided to take with the rook because somehow I thought I'll give him this b pawn in this line and he will have easier time marching his pawns. The engine disagrees. The engine says that here I will have easier time of marching my pawns because his king is here and his pieces get stuck in the way. c5 is not possible for the time being because the bishop will be hanging. So black is a little bit better here, but still life goes on and it's not the end of the world for white, but this would have been much better than what I did. I took with the rook and now I'm no longer better. It's equal according to the engine. Humanly speaking, it's harder to play for black because he goes rook d4 and his plan is very simple. He wants to go here and just grab this pawn for free and then do the same thing that I showed you, play on the queen side with pushing the pawns. Now he can do that easily without the queens, no danger to the king. I go rook b7, sidestepping and not allowing him to jump with the knight to a5 and c6, which is unpleasant in very many variations. Here he goes rook d1. He wants to go rook b4 in this position, but if in this position he goes rook b4, I'll take his d5 pawn. He doesn't want that, so he first puts the rook on the d file another one, and now he wants to go rook b4. So what do? I prevented before top engine move. Whenever you have a weakness, which b5 clearly is, it's a good rule of thumb to push it. To push it if it's a pawn weakness. Now my rook also has longer scope now. If we compare it with this position, it just has negligible scope. And what's most important, I've prevented the rook b4 idea, but I haven't prevented rook c4 idea. And now I realize that the rook wants to infiltrate like this. Very good positional play by my opponent. I go rook e8, preparing in some variations to push this pawn of mine, and he goes rook c6. And here I misplayed my position. I should have just defended this pawn, and it's completely equal. It's not clear how to break through for white. For black also it's not clear. But I decided, you know what, this pawn is backward, and if he takes it, I'll go bishop c7, take on f4, and my bishop will be free to roam the board. And I decide, you know what, I'll just push e3. And he takes, I go here, he drops back, and I take the f4 pawn. And even though the engine says it's still close to equal, but this pawn is too dangerous. Now black has to play very precisely to not be much worse. So first he kicks my bishop with g3. The only move that holds the balance apparently is bishop e5, which is counterintuitive because my rook now has no contact with the e3 pawn, and rook g3 looks like a very sensible idea of just capturing this pawn. Turns out after rook b3 I just have rook d7 and I'll take the d5 pawn instead. So it's equal. But somehow after g3 I briefly considered bishop e5, but I decided bishop b8 is more logical to not get in the way of my pieces. But somehow white is much better here already after knight c5, jumping with my knight. And here I entered some deep think. I had like 15 minutes left out of the allotted 45 minutes. I realized that if I go rook a7, I didn't like, which is like, there are two moves. The engine says both are like approximately plus 0.7, 0.8 for white. So advantage for white, but not winning yet. And rook a7, I didn't like knight a6 ideas, and I decided I go rook c7. Obviously, he still has knight a6, but I calculated some. Actually, I calculated rook b7 or rook d7 were my moves that I was considering. Rook d7, just giving up this pawn and going knight a4, with the idea of pushing my pawns like this was one of the ideas. So yeah, but I will not encumber you with the crazy variations that I calculated here. So instead, he did not even go knight a6. He traded and pushed d6, which I also calculated, which is why I spent some time on rook c7 here, like half of my remaining time I spent on rook c7. He pushed d6, and I go bishop b6, and I realized that he will be able to capture my pawn, but I will be able to capture his pawn on d6. And this is exactly what happened. The problem is I didn't evaluate the position correctly. Here I should have played bishop c5. Actually, I was considering this move. But somehow I decided, okay, knight e4 looks more attacking, I don't know, more active. But now he goes knight c6. And suddenly, we trade, and suddenly I realize around this time that only white is playing this endgame for a win, because white takes a pawn. White is now a pawn up. And yes, I also have my pawns that should be rolling on this side of the board, but they are not rolling. It's too long a journey that awaits them. It's like, I don't know, Frodo going with the ring. He took like, I don't know how long, several months, maybe more than a year, to take the ring to the mountain of Aradruin. So these guys will take a long time, whereas these guys, the white guys, will take much faster to march and queen. So, but I have to play on, of course. I go knight 94. These guys cannot start marching just yet, because if they go here, I go e2, and there will be a check winning the bishop. And if c4, then this check is nice, and I'll win the c pawn. So not now. The pawn march starts not now. Knight 97 first, check. Here, king f8 was the most logical move, but I didn't like the fact that my king is cut off, and I wanted my king to play an active role in the game. So I went king h7 to somehow support my pawn march with my king, which is an inaccuracy according to the engine. Knight d5 attacks my bishop, drop back, bishop e2 calmly, and now actually white is ready to march the pawns. Already c4 is possible next. I go f5. I try desperately to launch my own pawn avalanche, c3, g5, king c2. Now I realize then king d3 is coming, and then my pawn will fall because the knight will just take it. So I have to prevent this. I go knight f2, preventing the this inroad for white's king. But now b4, and I realize I have just a couple of minutes on the clock, and I realize I'm probably busted because I'm not fast enough. My pawns are not getting anywhere, unfortunately. I go king g6, trying to come to the rescue with my king, but it's too late. I go f4, at least desperately. I trade two of my pawns for one of his pawns because here I realize I have to go for the position where he has to deliver a bishop and knight checkmate against my king, because he's a junior player. Junior players sometimes don't learn their endgames. I know this, even if they're tactically very smart and positionally sharp, but sometimes they don't learn their endgames. What are the chances that he knows the bishop and knight mate? Probably, I would say, if he's 20-50 rated, around 80%. So I have 20% chance of surviving, and if I don't survive, this will be very instructive content for you guys, how to checkmate with the bishop and the knight. So it's a win-win, I decide. He takes with check, I go king f5, and here he goes b6. If I take his knight, he'll take my bishop, so I have to drop back. Now he goes knight b4. I thought the most clinical way to win here is knight c7, and the engine actually agrees. And once I go here, he can just push this pawn. And at some point I will have to drop back, and I will have to give up the knight for this pawn, and this bishop can do nothing. If I trade here, okay, I'll take one pawn, but this pawn survives, and white will have a bishop and a pawn against a sole king, which is a lone king, which is winning easily. So this would have been an easier victory, but he went knight b4, which is still winning. He wants to go here and then queen the pawn, and I will have to give up the bishop for this pawn because my king is not in time. But I'm very glad about that, because I was intending to give the bishop up for a couple of pawns. So I take one pawn, and now I take another pawn, and I realize that, okay, now I have to take the final pawn, because otherwise he'll just march it to queening, and it's probably not a good idea to allow him that. Definitely this knight is not a good warrior by his own, so I take his pawn, and we get this position, and this is the starting position from which there should be a forced mate in something like 25 or 26 moves. So when I studied those kinds of checkmates, I studied them a little bit, but it was enough for me to memorize everything. Once my coach, Farukh Amanatov, Grandmaster, asked me to demonstrate on the board to checkmate him with the bishop and the knight, and I did it in like a couple of minutes. So I know how to do it, and I will show you, and you will know, even if you're an amateur player, you will know how to do it. So first of all, basic rules. You need to checkmate your opponent's king in one of those corners, this one or that one. You can only checkmate your king if you have a light squared bishop in the light squared corner. So it is a8 or h1 respectively. If you have the dark squared bishop, then h8 and a1 respectively. So when you are playing, I will also teach you how to play in a tricky way to try and make a draw if you have just a king. If you want to play in a tricky way, you have to run to the opposite colored corner, not the same color as the bishop, so h8 or a1, and then you have to stay there as long as you can. And when you get smoked out, you get smoked out. For example, your opponent wants you to go to the correct corner, to this side of the board where you will easily get checkmated. So when you are here, so let's see what happens. I go to that corner. I also win some time attacking his bishop, so a couple of tempi, which is important because I want to last 50 moves. That makes a draw because of the 50 move rule. So so I'm in this corner, and now he tries smoking me out. He goes knight f7. Now I cannot go to the corner. I have to go here, and he methodically smokes me out for me to go to the correct corner. Whenever your opponent does that, you have to try and run away to the other corner, that one, and then you'll be fine. So let me show you what happened next. So at first it was not clear if my opponent knows the correct technique or not, because he started doing the right thing, smoking me out of this incorrect corner. I go king f8. Now he goes bishop h7, very precise. So I cannot go back to that corner. I run that way. And the correct method for delivering a checkmate with a bishop and a knight involves a W by your knight, which is this 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4, 5. This shaped, well, it looks like a W, obviously. So this is required for you to prevent the king from running away. And that's exactly what my opponent starts doing. So when I go king 8, he goes knight e5. So he starts drawing the W. And once I go king d8, he goes king e6. And now, if I just stand idly and do nothing, go back, for example, the W will be continued. So now I cannot go back, I go here. Now you can go here, for example. If you run back, you'll get checked with the bishop and you will have to step back. So you have to run here. And now knight c5 completes the W. So I cannot run away. And if I go here, bishop cuts me here. So I have to run back. And then you can just make like a waiting move. And because if I go here back, knight b7. So the W is finally completed. Here, 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 here. It's a check. The bishop is cutting the king here, so you have to run to the right. And now king c6. The knight is cutting the king, and now king here, and now bishop g4, and now the bishop is cutting the king. And if king here, then you can just go knight c5, and the king is not escaping. The king has to only go to those squares. And now king b6, and the final part is very easy. You probably have seen it. If you haven't, king here, knight here, check. The bishop, let me remind you, is cutting the king. And after king a8, bishop f3 is a checkmate. This did not happen in the game. I'm showing you the most effective, the most efficient way to checkmate with the bishop and the knight. Let me calculate the number of moves. So it was 25 moves, exactly 25 moves from this position, starting position, to the position that I showed you. So if you play in the best way, if you know the method, even if your opponent tries to run to the different corner, it doesn't help him or her. It helps him or her just to survive for 25 moves, but not 50 moves. So now we get this position. He goes knight e5 again. So part of W is already drawn. I cannot go here because of the knight. I go here. He goes here. And I just showed you what happens if I go king e8. But of course, I try to be tricky and run away. And I go king c7. I try to run away here and go to the dark squared color, dark colored corner of the board. Another one. So both work for me fine. And if I manage to run away, actually the task for my opponent will be much harder, because 25 moves is when you play ideally. When you let your opponent off a hook once, the king will take like 10, 15 maybe moves to run back and forth. And it's now not 25 moves, but already like 40 moves. So you are close to not being in time to do this within 50 moves. If you let your opponent's king run away one time, it's okay. But 2 times, most likely you won't make it. 50 moves rule will be applied and it will be a draw. So I'm praying for being able to run away once and then hopefully twice, and then my job is done and I get a draw. And here, what you do, this is the final position that you need to memorize. What you do when your opponent's king tries to go to the opposite corner. This will happen in your games if your opponents are tricky. You still do the W, you still go knight d7, exactly drawing the same shape as I told you, knight d7, because knight d7 prevents the opponent from going to b6. But what if opponent goes to c6? Now opponent still wants to go to that corner. What to do now? Now it's very easy. You just have to prevent one move, because your knight is cutting the dark squares, and you need to use your bishop to cut the king further. Bishop d3. And now black is cooked, because black is not able to run away. Black has to go back to c7 or b7, and then in this corner, black's king will die. So that's what the final thing that you need to know here. Knight d7, and then bishop d3. Completing the W, and then using the bishop to finish things off. But my opponent, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he confused the move order. He went bishop d3 first, and I went king b6. So he let me off the hook once, because this is why knight d7 was necessary first, to not allow this. And now king b6, and I'm like, whew, I breathe a sigh of relief. I realized that one time I did it, maybe I can do it twice, and then things are looking nice. He goes king d6, king a5. He realizes that it's not good for him what happens, and I see that he's getting slightly tilted. You know, some children are emotional, and he's getting emotional. He's like starting to bang on the clock when he hits the clock, trying to maybe psychologically intimidate me, or maybe this is his frustration and he's frustrated at himself. Still, he has a forced mate in 22 moves, according to the engine, from this position, and he still has the time. So this is move 76. The last capture was on move 57. So he has to do it until move 107. And he can do it, and at this point he can do it up until the move 99. So he still has the time. But if I run away once again, then it's a problem for him. Now he does the same thing. He tries to smoke me out of that corner and make me go to that corner. So he goes bishop d3, and now bishop here. So again, this is a very important first step, smoking me out of the corner. I go here. Now the W. Again, so as you saw, this is the W that you need to draw. So he goes here, not allowing me to run like this. I go here, same thing. And now he needs to do the same thing that I showed you. King c4, king b6. Now I want to run away like this, and I run away to that corner. Now he has to go knight b5 to not allow me to run there. Again, completing the W. Again, here, here, here. This is all very, very easy if you know the rules, if you know the technique. And if I go here, now this square is the only one that you need to cut. What do? You use your bishop f5, just cutting the king here. And my only like future for the king is to die in that godforsaken corner. So that's what he should have done here. After my move, king here, go king c4, which is logical, and after king here, he needed to continue drawing the W, but he forgot about it, or he didn't know. He went bishop f5, trying to cut me like this. But again, you should have first completed the W and then bishop f5. And I go king c7, and I'm again running away. And I'm running away, and I'm like, probably it's like, it's a high chance, there is a high chance he doesn't know, or he hasn't memorized the technique in the right order, and he hasn't been able to adjust. He still has time. He could have thought more, but he's tilted. He's smashing on the clock. And the rest of the game is him being very frustrated, trying to check me. I run to that corner. I'm very happy. I realized that probably 50 moves, he'll not make it in 50 moves, even with perfect play. The engine says already that he won't. We make some more moves. He is preventing me from going to that corner, and now he wants me to go to that corner. My king is a traveler. He visited all the continents during that game. And I go king h5, but still he has not enough time. He needs like, I don't know, 15 more moves to checkmate me, and he only has 13 moves until move 107 here. And he goes knight g6. Already he probably resigned himself to the fact that it will be a draw. By the way, I will tell you a story about the end of this game. Very, very instructive story. I go king h6, and we shuffle our pieces a little bit more, a little bit longer. And he starts smoking me out of this corner again to that corner for some reason. He goes bishop h7 again, cutting me like this. And I go here. Now he needs to do the W if he knows what to do, but it's already move 105, and he needs to checkmate me in 2 moves, which will not happen. And here I call the arbiter. I tell him it's like move 51 after the last capture was made. The arbiter is checking everything. And the guy did not even shake my hand, did not even say anything, did not even sign the score sheet. He just stormed off the playing hall. And I think it's very bad sportsmanship. You should not do this, even if you are a child. If you are a parent, you should teach your kid not to behave like this. Otherwise, he played a good game, but he didn't know the technique. If he went back in time, not burn back. If he went forward in time and to see my video and learn this technique and then manage to come back and implement it, then it wouldn't have happened, but then the video wouldn't have happened, right? The butterfly effect. So everything would have changed. And with this very, very, very lucky turn of events, I finished my tournament on I don't remember the exact place, somewhere a little bit below the middle pack, because I have 4 points out of 9. But I've played a bunch of international masters, FIDE masters, champions of Kazakhstan, talented juniors. I've gained some rating, around 13 rating points on the basis of this tournament. And I'm quite happy. I got some nice practice and played some nice games featuring some sacrifices. If you enjoyed this series of recaps, please drop a comment and stay tuned for the candidates content very soon. You will enjoy it. See you. Bye-bye.